So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we are on Thranduil's Halls once again today, albeit it's Thranduil's Halls with a theme that would be not out of place in a Halloween style game, to be honest with you, because we are going to be seeing quite a lot of undead units on the defence today, because we have the neutrals defending, which is kind of an interesting thing. It's a mix of all of the units which non-aligned factions can use, which will of course be quite heavily leaned on in the campaign when the campaign gets a little bit more development after all of the multiplayer stuff has been completed. So of course before we actually see the neutrals in action in single player, we will have to await the arrival of Ered Luin and Dol Guldur first of all. So baby steps, but yeah, we'll be seeing the neutrals on the defence today. There are some units which are seen in other factions, quite a few actually. But there are also units which are completely unique to the neutrals, so it'll be quite interesting to go through their army roster. It's a mix of units that are sort of specialised for them, as well as a mix of units which used to be in the game as part of other factions, but now are just in the neutrals as well. So kind of interesting there, but we'll go through the attackers first and foremost with factions that are a little bit more familiar to us, starting off with Nawaki, who's playing as Rhudaur, and perhaps rather wisely, considering the fact that there are certain units that the neutrals have access to which are quite hard to wear down. He's brought some artillery, which of course, regardless of what sort of unit there is, they will be able to do the business and kill them off. Now, that wasn't always the case. There was once upon a time where this very strongest dwarven unit could actually survive a ballista shot, but thankfully we don't live in those times anymore, because that was very, very difficult to deal with. Catapult and ballista. So 2 units of artillery is very expensive, but could also be very useful for breaking up some of the tankier units that the neutrals have access to. We've also got some Metamor's Troll Hunters, which will be useful for the same kind of reason, to be honest with you. Those arm-piercing javelins are obviously very useful, and the cavalry unit that perhaps you've already caught a glimpse of that the neutrals have access to will also be... the Metamor's Troll Hunters will also be pretty good against that. Witch-Realm Enslavers, obviously big, armour-piercing, multiple HP bodyguard unit. Just in behind we have some Rhudaur pikemen. We have a significant number of Rhudaur swordsmen as well, for numbers purposes of course, which is always going to be useful. Some Rhudaur marksmen and some Rhudaur nobles as well for a bit of mobility, and of course if you can break through the defences in Thranduil's Halls, there's a lot of room to manoeuvre in between the outer layer of the defence and the interior of the halls themselves, which is ideal grounds for cavalry, for the attackers. And for the defenders too, I suppose, to try and prevent the situation from spiralling out of control. Then we have Josh, who's playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. He's got a full line of Mountain Uruk host. Decent line infantry, again very similar in terms of what they offer to the Uruk-hai infantry over in Isengard, albeit Isengard are a little bit more well-rounded around that unit at the mid-tier, whereas the Mountain Uruk host will generally be surrounded by a lot of heavy goblins, which is not worse by any means. It means they've got more numbers around them. It means that certainly it looks quite intimidating when you see the numbers, and note that there is a bit of quality in there as well. But you do need to bear that in mind. Like, they don't have the really solid backup that Uruk-hai pikes offer. Instead they have a numbers-based backup, which means that they're going to have to try and get through the enemy a little bit more quickly. Heavy Goblin Spears are a good backup unit to have though, because not only do they have a lot of holding power when they go into shield wall, but also they have that AP, which fewer spears in the game have. Cave Trolls, good for breaking a line, which will be very useful in this sort of situation in Thranduil's Halls. Some heavy goblin halberds again, so numerous phalanx unit here, armour piercing. Obviously they're not the best halberds in the world, but they will still do their job. Goblin King bodyguard back here as well with his general in it, nice safe place to put him. And some cave troll drummers as well to keep all these heavy goblins in line, and the crossbows of course, a must-have for the Misty Mountains in pretty much any situation, to be honest with you. It's very much like Isengard, where their Uruk-hai crossbows are too good not to bring in their compositions. Certainly I think it's the case with the Misty Mountains, because it offers them a reliable way to deal damage, while their numbers and maybe lower quality based army holds the enemy in place for a little bit longer. And then finally back here in the trees we see Mordor, played by Nubiwan. He's got some Morannon infantry back here, some Sauron's Will, so the upper tier shock infantry with AP. Morannon halberds, I think they're a little bit better than the heavy goblin halberds to be fair, but not by much, not to the extent that it makes a massive difference, to be honest with you, in a phalanx unit. Minas Morgul Chosen and Blackguard of Barad-dûr, so the heavier Mordor units, good for pushing and holding, both of them, albeit they will probably be pushing in this battle considering they're on the attack. Orc Javelins, cheap javelins are always useful for reasons I mention fairly consistently. troll drummers as well, so they will be able to keep their own units in line. Olag High, a lot of elite units as well. Nazgul, Black Riders actually. Interesting. So they're not unique to the neutrals. The mounted Nazgul. Fascinating. That's interesting. I wonder how they got access to them. They must be playing with slightly edited game files for Mordor to have access to Black Riders, I believe. Temple Executioners though. We have some Temple Guard and we have some Scouts as well. Yeah, Scouts. Again, like they're technically Orc Archers, but their old name is returned. It's weird. It's like, I'm not sure, like sometimes people do some trickery, like how they get access to, there's a catapult there for Misty Mounts as well, they do some trickery, like how they got access to Dunland in the first place was because of people messing around with the game files and wanting to play as them even though they weren't really a competitive faction. Kind of the same thing here with utilising some of the neutrals. So you can see here, Engsfitz, and I believe it's Master Blaster who is playing as the neutrals today. Yes it is. After the Moria game, hopefully he can do a little bit better because he played very poorly in that game, I have to say. But he's in his element here, playing as a faction like this. Neutrals, Morroquendi bows, so obviously poison arrows, obviously a part of the Dorwinian faction. Morroquendi pikes are as well. Spears of Emondui are a part of Mirkwood. We have some Marchwards who are part of Lothlorien. Trollshort axe throwers, of course, part of Rhudaur. We've got some Corsair fencers, part of Umbar, so you can see the massive variation in unit types that we have. Spears of Orthanc, which are a very good unit that are part of Dunland. We have more Morroquendi bows once again, so that's Dorwinian. More Spears of Emondui and pikes, more spears. Obviously they have a varied roster in terms of how many factions they span, but also equally limited as well. Black Riders, so we saw them as part of Mordor, but generally speaking I think they were only part of the neutrals. The Ents, very impressive unit as well. Back here we have the Dead of the Marshes, which this is the sort of genuinely fully unique unit to the neutrals back here, and we will be seeing a fair bit of them today I think. Good for holding the line against similar sort of unit I believe to the Barrow Wights, at least I think that was their initial the initial idea behind them before they got dumped into the neutrals. Mountain Uruk Pikemen, of course, used to be a part of the Misty Mountains, now no longer. Mountain Uruk Coast are a current part of the Misty Mountains. The Ents, of course, back here, pretty similar to what we can expect elsewhere. Dead of the Marshes, lurking around in the tall grass. Mercenary Guildsmen are part of Cardolan, and also Khazad-dûm. More Black Riders. We see some Mercenary War Chiefs, which are, again, used to be a part of Cardolan, no more. They are only in the neutrals now. We have some Morroquendi Pikes here. Some Scouts, like we saw, apparently a part of Mordor, although not really, because, you know, it's supposed to be the Orc Archers, not the Scouts. Scouts, Morroquendi Pikes, there's some more mercenaries in the trees back here, War Chiefs, Guildsmen, and Dead of the Marshes back there. Are a lot of Dead of the Marshes, as you would expect. So I will make a cut, because it's quite likely that the attackers will wait for all their armies to converge over on that hilltop over there before moving in. So I will rejoin when they are advancing upon the ramparts. So here we go, the Scouts are opening up on the Snaga Skirmishers as they move into position through these trees over here. But obviously the Snaga Skirmishers, a very good target to go after. Heavy Goblin Spears will do a little bit better under this kind of arrow fire, but it's a lot. I have to say, in the cut, in the off time, these artillery pieces were taking pot shots into Master Blaster's line, and it's not looking good. I have to say, like, he just sat there and took this. And that's unfortunate. I mean, it's not crippling damage, but still, it's the sort of thing that can easily be avoided by just putting your men into loose formation and making it so the artillery can't just fire right along your lines. And Master Blaster neglected to do that, and it looks as though he's going to neglect to get himself into the proper position here again. So it's not looking good here right from the off, I have to say. Yeah, hopefully he can do a little bit better, because again, I really don't want to show 2 games in a row where he puts in poor performances, but it's not looking too promising so far, let's just say that. Ents are moving forward, Black Riders are moving forward from Engsfitz, the Scouts, you know, far too late really, trying to avoid the attentions of the Granadine nobles, who have now retreated back into the trees, as have the Snow Trolls, as have, well, not really much of the army is moving across here so far, to be honest with you. Same mistake, however, being made on the other side of things with the attackers as well, as these skirmishers have really been sent forward without really much support at all. So they rout off immediately at the hands of the Ents, and of course at the hands of the Black Riders. Speaking of which, the Black Riders are in melee against the Snow Trolls. Now, that's not really where you want the Black Riders to be, I don't think. But with 2 units of Black Riders and with Ents, this is going to very quickly turn the battle against the Snow Trolls. But again, I'm quite surprised Master Blaster just rode his Black Riders, his small cavalry unit, right into the clutches of some Trolls. Just the way that he's played these last 2 games, it feels like his micro's non-existent. He's getting out of there now, which is good. After a coaster moving across. Again, very much baby steps for the attackers so far. They're sending across units in very small quantities. I can understand them not wanting to go right into the teeth of a large force, but they may have to be honest with you. Master Blasters, Black Riders charging in. They're going to try and rout the Heavy Goblin Spears. I think they're a little bit isolated after all. And the Black Riders are certainly a unit which will cause fear and the like. Those Snow Trolls, however, taking a real beating. It's Master Blasters Ents that are in here as well. I mean, they'll do a ton of damage to the Heavy Goblin Spears. The AP actually will be pretty good against the Ents, and they're also going to get surrounded here by the Mountaineer Coast, so not great for the Ents. I would suggest they actually probably want to get out of here at this point, cut their losses and leave. Like, they don't need to sacrifice these really high tier units on trying to deal with these heavy goblins, especially not when they've got arrows that can do the same job here when they're all messed up in terms of their formation. Black Riders still buzzing around out here. Mountaineer Coast, they wouldn't be a bad target to charge into. They're going to try and go after the Snow Trolls, so finish them off. Only 5 of them remain. How many of those Ents are still alive? All 11 of them, I think. Having said that, how long is that? Nope, one of them has fallen, which is a bad sign, to be honest with you. Need to get out of here at this point. More of those Snow Trolls falling at the hands of the Black Riders, who haven't lost a single of their number yet, which is impressive considering they were in sustained melee with Snow Trolls. As strong as Nazgul can be, Trolls kick out a lot of damage. I'm surprised at least one of them didn't fall, especially given their rather static nature in that fight. The Ents do escape, with only one of them falling. Just about. A Heavy Goblin Spear there missing his mark, but yeah, a lot of Trolls, a lot of Heavy Goblins falling. Another shower of arrows coming their way also. I don't know how effective some of these units on the defence can be. We know obviously the Morikwendi Pikes are going to be good at holding the line. We know the Dead of the Marshes are going to be difficult to break down. But other units like the Mercenaries, are they something that you can really build a successful defence on? We shall see. Ettenmall's Troll Hunters taking a bit of damage, but again, the Scouts are one of those lower tier archers which are going to have poor accuracy at long range. So it's unlikely to be as much of a concern, especially for one of the more armoured Rhudaur units, albeit the Morannon Halberds are definitely a good target for these archers to go after. They will fall in droves. Some poison arrows as well coming from on high. As we can see the Morikwendi, well actually no, it's March Wolves of the Wood. I thought it was the Morikwendi bows firing, and I forgot the March Wolves of the Wood were still here. In a good position, they're in a position as well which allows them to bypass this little fence in front of them. Definitely some good targets in there. So a combination of lower tier archers in the Scouts and obviously the March Wolves of the Wood, which are a little bit more impressive. Going to be doing damage to the attackers as they cross over to this side of the river. What have we here? Sounds of battle here, but I don't think they've actually made it into melee combat just yet, so they might be jumping the gun just a little bit. The Scouts, actually no they aren't, the Scouts are engaged with a troll. So in come the Black Riders, breaking out of their defensive position. This might be a bit of a problem for the Morannon infantry, honestly. You can see that they are already shaken as a result of the Black Riders doing their thing. One of the Black Riders is the Witch King as well, I believe, so that's quite nice and thematic. Both units of Black Riders are out here doing their thing, trying to prevent the Morannon infantry from getting into a good position. And of course, eventually the Morannon infantry, I think, will struggle regardless of dealing with the Morikwendi Pikes. Mercenary Guildsmen are AP as well, which will be useful against the basic units from both Mordor and the Misty Mountains, to be honest with you. And you can actually see that some of these Macemen have broken ranks to engage with the Morannon infantry. I probably wouldn't have recommended that, to be honest with you. I mean, the safety of your pike line will allow these units to do a lot better over a longer period of time. Rather than charging in here to the Mordor units. What this is going to allow Mordor to do potentially is actually to get some halberds into position to more effectively deal with these mercenaries. Unless he rolls the pikes forward. There's also some heavy goblin spears in here, albeit they're already wavering. That's the damaged unit that's already been in contact with the Ents, and they're already routing. A few poison arrows hitting them, as well as overwhelming odds in melee against the Morikwendi. And that was easy as can be. Don't know what those elven archers are doing though. They're shooting right into the ground right in front of them. Snaga skirmishers trying to do their thing. That might be the target the elven archers are going after, to be honest with you. A few more javelins being flung uphill, trying to do some damage to this side of the Morroquendi pike line. These mercenaries have pushed forward. It is good actually that the Morroquendi pikes have come forward as well, so now this is a little bit more like it because you've got the combined arms of the pikes and the line infantry, armour piercing line infantry as well. So yeah, these Moranon infantrymen really going to struggle here, and the Morroquendi pikes will make it so that even if the halberds do get into a comfortable position, they're going to be outranged by the elven pikes. And that's going to allow them to clean up this Mordor assault, I believe. See what's happening elsewhere. Are they planning on moving in anywhere else? No, they're not moving in here, but the Black Riders are going to come forth from that opening. Large ones of the wood. Continuing to fire as well. I wonder what they're firing at. They're going after the scouts, just trying to make sure that they can't skirmish. I mean, the scouts are ideal for the attackers here because they're a lower tier archer. If you can possibly help it though, it might be best to try and get the Black Riders into them because their morale isn't going to be the best either. Mountaineer Coast you can deal with by other means. Meanwhile, I mean, this is the risk of pushing forward. If the attackers are paying attention, they can try and wriggle behind your lines, and that's exactly what Nawaki is doing here with his Rhudaur swordsman. Master Blaster does have some units he can call upon to shut that door, however the Mercenary War Chiefs, a unit of heavy swordsmen, which you would expect, while I say that, like the numbers at disadvantage they're at is pretty extreme, to be honest with you, to the point where I might actually expect the Rhudaur swordsman to win that fight. We shall see. And there's still a gap, honestly, that they can push through as well if they send more units up here. We'll see if the Rhudaur swordsmen do that. But so far, the front line is holding. More than holding, actually. It's continuing to do severe damage, actually, to the Mordor front line. So as much as Rhudaur is flanking around is all well and good, they need to keep the attack on the front line going as well to make sure that these units can't simply reposition and deal with the Rhudaur units. The scouts and the pikes taking a little bit of damage there. Yeah, they've got a decent shot, these low tier archers, to be honest with you, so they're going to be able to do some damage there. The Black Riders continuing to make a nuisance of themselves, actually doing a really good job of charging into these Mountaineer Coast and trying to defuse this situation. If they can deal with this Mountaineer Coast, if they can somehow get around them and get into the scouts, I still think that's their best bet at doing something really useful in this fight, albeit with these big two-handed swords. Mountaineer Coast are shaken, so yeah, you can see the morale debuffing effect the Black Riders clearly have. And with that mobility as well, it's making the other two choke points a little bit less of an enticing prospect. I will say that what the attackers are doing wrong here is they're not committing enough across the river right away. A very common complaint that I have, it seems, on attackers, but the best way to attack is to attack every angle that you can all at once. And there are two choke points they're making no use of here, with all of their units still just hanging out over the other side of the river. It's very comfortable at the moment for the defenders to hold on to just the one choke point. It means they can filter across resources as they need to. The mercenaries fighting hard on the front line, those maces definitely up against the right kind of foes. Moranon halberds are pointing the wrong way as well. They're already at a disadvantage enough against the Morroquendi. That is a bug, of course, that's not Newbie One's fault, it's something which happens. These scouts out of ammunition, joining the front line now. Little more than cannon fodder they will be, but they will at least offer the War Chiefs a little bit more in terms of numbers. And actually the War Chiefs have done really well against the Rhudaur swordsman. It does go to show how effective two-handed swordsmen can be against the right target. The Rhudaur swordsman, of course, not with a great deal of melee defense nor armor. Ideal targets for those Zweihanders. What have we got here? Scouts. Morroquendi pikes continuing to push forward. That is looks like a route there from Mordor. Yeah, a chain route is on the way. The Moranon infantry aren't quite yet, but they are wavering. Snaga skirmishers doing their best to get some good damage done before the Mordor front line falls apart, but that isn't going to be too much longer. But give them credit, they are chipping away at this manpower over here. And the Morroquendi pikes, I think, are the key to this defence. If they lose the Morroquendi pikes, they're going to be in trouble. Here come Master Blasters, Black Riders, getting in and amongst things, exactly where they want to be, causing the Snaga to rout off. I imagine the Moranon infantry won't be too far behind. Black Riders attacking them from one side, the front line attacking them from the other, and there they go. Good move there from the Black Riders. They need to keep moving now, though, because the Olakai are on their way in. That's a little bit more like it from Master Blaster. What about Enxvitz's Black Riders? Are they still around here? Possibly not, because heavy goblin spears are moving in now. Black riders are a mounted unit after all, you do want to keep them away from spears if you can. A few arrows threaded through the middle here. Dead of the Marshes are still hiding, going after the Mountain Uruk pikes. Either they or the Morroquendi pikes are definitely the best targets to be going after. Trollshaw axe throwers could play a really big part in the later phases of the battles as well. Mercenary guildsmen are routing, maybe biting off a little bit more than they can chew. Going up against something like Olag High. Yeah, and here comes the artillery shots from behind as well, doing some really good damage to the mercenary war chiefs. The lower mercenary morale rearing its ugly head. And all of a sudden, this front line over here isn't actually looking terribly organised. Now, there are Ents in and amongst here, but they're going to need some support, the Ents. They do still have the Morroquendi pikes from one side, but I think they're going to need more in terms of infantry to really help finish off the Olag High. Let's not forget the Ents have already seen combat against snow trolls and against heavy goblin spears. Olag High are fresh. There go the mercenary war chiefs routing into the enemy. You could spin that and say they're making a heroic charge to try and hold back the tide. A forlorn hope. Scouts and Morroquendi bows firing from on high. Again, like that morale debuffing effect is effectively cancelling out the effect of the troll drummers on the unit that they're hitting, but obviously that means that you're just sort of returning to a neutral state of affairs. You're not really gaining anything, neither side really. I don't know what the exact numbers are, so maybe one side is gaining something slightly. If I had to guess, I would assume the troll drummer's morale effect is probably greater than the morale debuff effect on the poison arrows, to be honest with you, but can they reform their line here? Morroquendi pikes, bouncer forces evenly matched, javelins coming in. Scouts, what about the Ents? Are they still there? Not really. I mean, you can see how devastated they are. This might be the only one left, in fact. Goes to show how much damage they took before. Didn't have it in them to face the Olag High after the exertions they've already put on themselves, but the heavy goblin spears are routing. This is the problem, like a lot of their units actually are. I mean, the presence of the Black Riders with their fear as well is probably having a pretty devastating effect too. Oof. Very narrow miss there from the spears of Orthanc, who are also firing away. A little bit harder to see their projectiles because they don't have the black trails, but their bolts are probably even more effective, to be honest with you, because the damage they're going to deal is going to be immense. Scouts are still firing from close range as well. Yeah, this is the problem, like they're trying to focus on this one choke point still, the attackers. The Olag High being in here does give them a bit of an edge, to be honest with you, because Morroquendi pikes will really not be like being in melee against those heavy trolls. But it's not ideal. Black Riders pulling away. Heavy Goblin Spears just waiting for their time. The Cave Trolls, like they are waiting for an opportunity to move in, I think. Well, actually over here, like again, the defenders have gone to sleep a little bit here because there is absolutely no way these Rhudaur swordsmen should have been allowed to get up onto the walls and get into these March Warns of the Wood. And those March Warns probably will end up being killed off at this point. I mean, Dead of the Marshes are making sure that they're trapped in there. You can see an eclectic mix of different ghouls. You can see some Elder Enway in there. You can see some Arthedain rank and file units. You can see some... not sure what they would be closest to. They've got an Elven axe, so I suppose it would be Lothlorien actually, even if the armour resembles something a little bit more like Lasarnak. There's also some orcs in there as well. But yeah, I think these the Rhudaur swordsmen are going to struggle as the Dead of the Marshes lumber their way into melee. But I mean, it just goes to show, like, this area over here, not all that well defended, to be honest with you. If the attackers blitzed up here, the defenders would be left scrambling a little bit, I think. Heavy Goblin crossbowmen moving in through the gap, so we are now seeing a bit of pressure being put on the middle. Rhudaur marksman and Heavy Goblin crossbowman doing that. What are they going to fire at, I wonder? I mean, again, we've seen Master Blaster in the last two games be a little bit too flat-footed, just sort of standing there and taking horrendous damage and not really doing anything about it quickly enough. This is a situation where he needs to move. We'll see what he does there. But over here, another unit of Ents has been added to the mix. Anxvitz's Ents. And what's left of the Olag High has been pretty much completely destroyed. There's one left. There are the Black Riders over here from Master Blaster. Oh And that 1-0 lag high is cutting them down, to be honest with you. Again, it's all about having a bit of awareness, to be honest with you. In come the Dead of the Marshes as well, so they're getting in here to help shore up the line. With the Ents over here as well, I mean, this is going to break this front line. Certainly over here, it's been a happy hunting ground for the defenders, albeit this artillery might change that somewhat. You can see there that one way to deal with a unit like the Dead of the Marshes is to use artillery on them, and you can scarcely miss with how much surface area they cover. More Black Riders did fall. Mountaineer at Coast are on their way over. More Dead of the Marshes. Mercenary War Chiefs, only 28 of them. Yeah. Good artillery play. Now we're moving in. Dead of the Marshes leading the way. Again, lumbering forward in the way that the Barrow Wights do. And now forced to retreat. They're not actually committing much in the way of infantry up there. Meanwhile, up on the ramparts, Rhudaur Swordsmen. They did finish off the March Wardens, but I don't think they're going to be so lucky against the Dead of the Marshes. It's going to take them a little while, I think, but they're going to be victorious nonetheless. But that's a little bit more of a concern for the defenders. A whole bunch of cave trolls marching their way up here. I mean, the Dead of the Marshes with their formation, they're not going to be able to stop the cave trolls from just marching right on through them if they so choose. I mean, I probably wouldn't be putting the cave trolls in sustained melee here. And again, there's not a lot of support coming up for the cave trolls. Like, again, they could be having a really successful assault up this hill, to be honest with you, but it's not looking like that's going to be the case here. So let's scoot across to the other side. The drummers are still in effect, trying to ensure that this morale stays on, but again, this is defending Mountaineer at Coast, and again, the Black Guard of Barad-dûr, it's all well and good pushing through this defence, but there's nothing following them up. There's still way too much of the attacking armies over on that side of the river for my liking. All of that artillery is lined up, including the Temple Guard, trying to do some damage. That's fine. The rest, however, needs to be over here, needs to be putting pressure on more than just one choke point, and that may very well end up being the downfall of the attackers here in the long run, because it is costing them very, very dearly. The Dead of the Marshes, they're taking a lot of damage from the artillery, to be fair. There's crossbow bolts coming in. The Black Guard are shaken. They're not going to last too much longer with ghouls in front of them and living trees behind them. A whole bunch more Dead of the Marshes are shambling forward as well, dealing with this very depleted unit of Sauron's Will. Troll drummers are now being committed to melee as well, which is always a sign that things are getting a little bit desperate. Especially when you hit your own men with artillery. That's going to cause them to rout. Even the troll drummers are routing. Temple Executioners moving in. I would suggest that perhaps these elite units probably should have been committed a little bit sooner. They could have been targeted down by something like the Spears of Orthanc, but it's a risk you've got to take sometimes, because otherwise you're just not going to gain anything with your low tier units. The artillery's trying its best to make the most of this, but we shall see. Dead of the Marshes continuing to march outwards. Heavy Goblin Spears are getting in the way to make sure they can't just march right the way to the crossbows, but it's going to be tough here. The Heavy Goblin Spears are going to do a decent job. Part of the problem with the Dead of the Marshes is a lot of the, like the first wave of their unit arrives far before the rest of the unit does because of their formation. So they're certainly not the most effective killers, I would say. They are a weird unit. I mean, it's possible they've been changed since the last time I saw them. So I don't really know what to expect, to be honest with you. There are the throwing axes, you can see. Thrown into that blob that includes cave trolls. I mean, they're not going to do the most amount of damage to cave trolls, I don't think, but that's not really the point. There's a lot of infantry up here as well that can be used. The troll axe throwers can be used on. With the addition of the cave trolls, the Dead of the Marshes are looking substantially more lightweight. And again, pikes are not really what you want up against trolls anyway, least of all the cave trolls actually, because of their higher mass. They can push through even a dense pike block. And up come the Mountaineer at Coast as well, a unit that's a little bit more serious, so this is a little bit more like it as far as an attack goes. Defeat is a distinct possibility. Animals Troll Hunters on the way up here as well. They're getting shot in the rear, however, by some scouts from the other side. In come the Frontline pikemen, which is definitely going to make the life of the Dead of the Marshes just that much more difficult. They're being shot by arrows, but they're actually pointing the right way, so their shields are coming into effect. That is Mordor's general. Finished off by one of the ghouls. yeah, these surrounded iron pikes will stand up to those arrow volleys from lower tier archers from the front reasonably well, actually, because of their shields. Snarker skirmishers moving forward. Temple executioners. That was where the Mordor general was, I believe, and he ended up not retreating with the rest of his unit as effectively. Or is it in the Nazgul? No, it must be in the Nazgul. They're surrounded by Dead of the Marshes. And you can see over here the attack has screeched to a halt. They're instead going to try and use ranged sources to try and deal with Dead of the Marshes, which is understandable. I think Dead of the Marshes as well, it would make a lot of sense if they were locked morale. And with only 26 there and they're still fighting against Nazgul, I think that's probably a safe assumption to make. That has the look of Snarker skirmishers. There are the crossbows, scouts, Rhudaur marksmen. Oh, there were clear projectiles there. I thought there was rangers firing for a second. Rhudaur axemen as well, heavy axemen. These Dead of the Marshes still just clinging on. What is that firing away? It is Spears of Orthanc, so they are serious at trying to do some damage here to this force, because eventually these Dead of the Marshes are going to be removed as an obstacle, and then they'll be able to march on in. They will of course fight to the bitter end, however, so that will buy them just a little bit more time. Engsvit's committing his Troll Shiraxorers to melee after they run out of ammunition, and they're going to try and get into the Atenmor's Shoal Hunters before they can get into a good position to rain death down upon the defenders. Of course, the Atenmor's Shoal Hunters are substantially more impressive in melee, but they do get a volley off into the Spears of Evanduir before the Troll Shores get into them. Now, the Cave Trolls, of course, without sufficient support, they have ended up being thrown backwards, so they survive up here, the defenders, not with as much as they once had, but it was ultimately an unsuccessful attack. Frodrum Javelins coming up from Rhudaur now there. Remember to keep track of those Troll Shores not being fighting alongside their brethren today. Defeat seems certain. Quite so, but they will still hold on for a little while longer yet. Well, another wave coming up here from Mordor, and some more Snarker skirmishers, but again they're just being sent to their demise here. Minas Morgul chosen a strong shore, and those Dead of the Marshes are taking hits, and they're only backed up by scouts. There's also the Temple executioners, but the problem is there are reinforcements that can be committed. There's more pikes, there's more Mountaineer at coast. Really, it just, the defenders can commit what they choose here, and they should be just fine. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Obviously, these Dead of the Marshes proving why they're quite a useful tool, because they, perhaps more so even than the Barrow Wights in the current version of the game, fill the role of just being a meat shield that is so hard to get rid of that it buys you as much time as you need. There go some Black Riders again, charging downhill into the Frodrum Javelins. That's risky. There's only 6 of them remaining. I mean, they're going to do some decent damage here to the Frodrums, but I mean, in melee, those big two-handed spiked great clubs are pretty good at dismounting riders. But you do need to deal with them because they represent a real danger with those javelins. Not going to be given the opportunity for that anymore though, because there will be a whole unit of Rhudaur swordsmen in the way, defending them from more charges from the Black Riders. And off they go. Spears of Evanduir, only 27 of them charging in. Obviously with 200 Rhudaur swordsmen they should feel fairly confident as long as no more reinforcements arrive. Rhudaur marksmen on the way over here as well, possibly out of ammunition. And now you can see with the Dead of the Marshes out of the way, we're seeing a fight pike to pike, Mountaineer pikes against Pyrannodine pikes. It'd be an interesting fight this, with the support of those Spears of Orthanc. You would imagine that this should probably go in favour of the defenders, but Heavy Goblin Spears moving in as well. They can send more reinforcements. There's still units across there, including Goblin King Bodyguard, the artillery crews, another unit Blackguard of Barad-dûr. I mean, there's less over there now than there once was, but do they have enough to finish the job? That would be my question. Victory almost a certainty. Over here it's gone quite poorly for the attackers, to be honest with you. They focused on this choke point, and I think they were hoping with the artillery support they could make it work. But in the end, hasn't really been the case, unfortunately. The defenders have been able to get a really good amount of kills, really good efficiency in these engagements. Orc javelins and snugger skirmishes. There's also some black wolds back there, which are a fairly heavy hitting unit, but how much are left? Temple Executioners, victory seems certain, still doing their thing. Dead of the Marshes, just rolling backwards a little bit, allowing Mordor a little bit more space, perhaps sensing they don't have the numbers anymore to flood forth and sort of rush over the hills to come to the aid of the other attacking positions. In come the Black Riders once again. What are they going to go after? Going after the javelins, definitely a good move. They make it there as well without getting targeted by the javelins. More kills for the Black Riders. They're going to need to cycle charge in and out though, because there's simply so many orcs and Snaga at this point that even the mighty Nazgul probably won't be able to escape from that fight unscathed. Meanwhile, you can see over here the Frontline pikes. I think what they've been trying to do here, it looks to me as though they've tried to bunch up as close as possible to the pikes to avoid the crossbow bolts, but in so doing, of course, they're allowing more damage to be done to them by the mountain pikes. At least that looks like what's happening based on how the unit is moving. So the neutrals will have a victory here. The pikes on the mountain pikemen look extra long, don't they? But obviously pikes all have the same length in mechanical terms. It's not like the long Yari Ashigaru from Shogun 2, where one of the first units in the game becomes arguably the most powerful unit overall. Defeat is a distinct possibility up here though, so this is looking like the best bet for the attackers at this point. If they can put a little bit more pressure on over here, maybe they can force this defence to capitulate. Victory seems certain for the forces of Rhudaur. Spears of Amenduir are up here as well. Yeah, I mean, if they have anything that they can send up here as support for Odrum Javelins and routing, which Roman slavers they could send in. Still heavy Goblin Halberdiers across there. I mean, it is a phalanx unit, but I mean, they're not going to be terribly useful to save if you're going to be faced with enemy pikemen in the long run. Defeat seems certain for the Franadines. They're just being overwhelmed. The crossbows are trying to shoot at the Troll Sharaxlers in behind, who they're obviously trying to go after the Mountain Uruk pikes, which is the right target by Nowaki. But the positioning is difficult for him to deal with, I think. So not something you can blame him for, really. The Troll Drummers have returned, giving a little bit more morale to Mordor over here. Both units of Black Riders. In come the Morroquendi bows into melee. Again, these heavier Elven archers, of course, are very capable of looking after themselves in melee. They make for a decent infantry unit, but could this be the moment for Mordor? I think this is pretty much their last hurrah as they come forward here. Minas Morgul chosen. They've got their Blackguard trying to push through. And yeah, there's not that much left on the front line, to be honest with you. Just Dad of the Marshes and Morroquendi bows. Unless they intend to use the Black Riders to supremely good effect. I think Mordor are actually going to break through over here. Javelins being tossed up into the air. Some of them will hit their mark, at the very least. In come the Black Riders from Exfit and from Master Blaster, albeit I think some of their own men were slightly in the way, to be honest with you. They need to be really careful as well, because there are still Moran on halberds in here, which you don't want to be charging into if you're a cavalry unit. Corsair Fencers going to be throwing those daggers in as well, which should be decently damaging. More or less at the halfway point of this battle at this point. Although I'm not entirely unconvinced there might not be a cut. I mean, if the defenders do decide to retreat to the halls, there will probably be a lengthy period in between where everyone is moving around a little bit. That may very well prove to be the case, because based on the amount of troops that the attackers and defenders have left, I can't imagine how it would take the same amount of time to get to the end from here. We shall see. Could be that the attackers sort of pull back and try to take a slower approach from here, although I don't know what benefit that would be for. These Mountain Uruk pikemen have actually been devastated a little bit. I would imagine that is from the Troll Shores, or from other ranged sources. So what are they doing? Yeah, they are steadily starting to retreat stuff back into Thranduil's halls, aren't they? Some of it anyway. They're not retreating everything. Although I think everything would probably be the wiser move at this point, because some of their defensive positions are starting to come unstuck. Morroquendi bows defeat seems certain. These Black Riders are still making a real nuisance of themselves, of course, and any charges they can get will be greatly appreciated. There's the Plague Doctor. Who knew that this was one of the Nazgul with his scythe? There are the Corsair fence as well. Oof, they're getting targeted though. They need to make up their mind what they're going to do pretty quickly. I think that was I think they fired a blank there. They're decent in melee as well, of course. Very damaging with those 2 rapiers. Oh, look at all those javelins. A shower of javelins there coming forth. Blackback Mountain Berserkers have made their way to the front line as well, so yeah, it's only a matter of time before the remaining troops over here do get cleaned up. Even with the Corsair fences, they don't really stand too much of a chance. Still, the Black Riders are going after some of the softer targets, trying to deny the attackers some of their numbers, which I think is the right way to go about things, to be honest with you. Meanwhile, over here, again the progress is slow but sure. This is to be expected when you're trying to mulch your way through Morroquendi Pikes and Dead of the Marshes, I suppose. It's not the kind of unit that you can expect to get through all that quickly unless you really compromise the defensive position. But Engsford is coming in with the Corsair fence as well, which is a massive problem here for Nawaki's Rhudaur troops that are still up here, and those Spears of Emanduir are there as well. So yeah, this assault looks as though it's going to fall apart, yet more valuable manpower circling the drain. Morroquendi bows, if they still have ammunition, they should definitely be retreated back to the halls. They're sort of future-proofing here. They're making sure that they don't commit forward or retreat too many units at once so they can continue to hold on, dig their heels in a little bit. Morroquendi bows are firing. This is definitely the right sort of target to be going after. In come the Spears of Orthanc as well. I mean, Corsair Fences and Spears of Orthanc are decent units. The Black Riders are still in and amongst things over here. There are the Temple Guard though. I mean, between Temple Guard, Blackback Berserkers, all the support they're getting from stuff like halberds, you'd imagine they should be just fine eventually, but I mean, the defenders will bleed them yet further for every inch of ground. Here are the Blackbacks, in with the Mountaineer at coast. Corsair Fencers maybe going to retreat, save another unit for later. Is this going to be the moment where the defenders do decide to retreat en masse? Still Spears of Emanduir fighting on the front line. Rhudaur pikemen are very depleted at this point. A lot of armour-piercing Rhudaur units are being committed forward, which not the most useful against Spears of Emanduir, but while Rhudaur Axemen might not be the best call, Black Walton, Witchram and Slavers should still be able to make their way through those basic Elven Spears. Trollshore Axe Throwers still lobbing their payload in. And you can see that they are definitely retreating more now. Spears of Emanduir, more pikes, back to the halls. These Trollshores are still just waiting. They're waiting for the perfect opportunity to fire into those unshielded, rather lightly armoured units. And they're pulling back their own spears to try and facilitate that. And they are going to be able to get a very decent amount of kills indeed into this blob, which that's going to be key. I don't know how many kills they're going to be able to get on the Witchram and Slavers per se, multiple HP as they are, but seeing that immediately, they're going to maybe one more volley they can get off. Oh no, that was a blank. Lost his nerve a bit, Engsford, but he's going to retreat these Trollshores. Every little helps in the late game. The Ballista Crew is going to catch them by the looks of things, though. Yes, they are. So the Trollshores are going to need to just continue to run and ignore them. A few of them may fall. Morroquendi bows are also retreating, as are the Spears of Orthanc. But I think with this, actually, I am going to make the cut here, because everything has pretty much been dealt with. I can't imagine the attackers are going to just charge forward with the first ranks of their armies into the halls, because they're probably not going to want to do that. They're probably going to want to reorganise all their army. They've still got a lot of heavy goblins back there, which they've kept in reserve, as well as the Goblin King bodyguard. They're going to want to consolidate their forces just outside the halls, I think, and that will be that. There's still a few spears in here, of course, but not for much longer. So yeah, I'll make a little cut, and we'll rejoin when the attackers are crossing into the halls of the dead. So we are back, albeit I think we're probably going to fast forward through this fight, because this is a fight which eventually, of course, the Dead of the Marshes are going to lose. The sheer might of the entirety of the enemy army is going to be brought down upon them. Having said that, it's going to take these Rhudaur units quite a long time to get through these Dead of the Marshes, so this is one of the few times that we'll be commentating over something that's on ×6 speed, interestingly enough, and in fact the Rhudaur units are trying to cycle in and out, I think, with their charge from their axes. Or are they going to be left alone here, the dead of the marshes, to retreat? In come the Black Riders. You can see here just how resilient they are, just look at the amount of punishment they're taking. Getting absolutely shredded on their way back to the halls. But that is going to be that, so that was just a quick aside. Now we will return to the cut and wait until the attacking army is fully in position. So we return. The battle for the interior of the halls gets underway. And honestly, I'm not sure how this is going to go. I think actually I will go up to ×2 speed for the majority of this fight, because what I imagine it's going to come down to here is just sheer staying power, and there's really not much I can say to commentate about that, because especially when you consider there's dead in the marshes and the sheer amount of pikes that are involved, albeit there isn't actually that many pikes left, but still, the point remains that this is going to come down to a slogfest. And again, there's a limited amount that I can say about that will be actually entertaining. But it is going to be interesting, because like one thing the neutrals do have is a lot of units that allow them to cling on like this. I would be quite interested to see quite how well they actually do. In fact, we're going to go up to ×6 speed. Again, it's not often that I fast forward through fights, but like this is going to be one of those situations where I feel like I have to, because there's only so much that we can say about such things. We'll get into a position where the attackers are actually flooding in, and then we'll go back down to 1 speed, I think. There goes the Rhudaur general. He delved a little bit too greedily there into the enemy lines. Charged in alone. And it doesn't look like the defenders have actually got any interest in allowing the attackers to spread their wings a little bit here, so we may be in ×6 speed for a little bit longer than I was anticipating. Because the Spears of Orthanc came in, Troll Shiraxlers threw their one remaining volley before charging in themselves. It really is going to come down, I think, to, well, there's a lot of heavy Goblin Halberds in there as well. It is a grisly fight, to say the least. The heavy Goblin Halberds in this particular situation, you can see a lot of them are routing off, like they just don't have the morale. And part of the problem here may be that if he doesn't commit his Goblin King's bodyguard, they're not going to have the morale to carry on, and that I think has been the problem so far. Some Witch Realm Enslavers in there. And we are in the final phase of the battle now, that much cannot be denied. Corsair Fencers throwing their daggers in. As the continued pressure on the front line is here, but I don't know, I think the attackers, they've played into the defenders' hands quite a few times in the way that they've decided to approach the battle on a macro level here. And I think that may ultimately end up being their undoing here, because they still have strong units on the defence. They've still got 2 units of Spears of Orthanc, which are very good at holding the line. They've still got pikes, which is a real problem, because it means that saving all those heavy Goblin Halberds for the late game has been effectively for nothing. Not really going to be all that useful in a situation like this. What do the attackers actually have left? Let's go and have a little look. Rhudaur Marksmen, Artillery Crews. Over here there's the Heavy Goblin Crossbows, which if they can get into position, fair enough, but the defenders, there's no way they're going to allow them to. Heavy Goblin Halberds, more Halberds, like they're what Josh has decided to save, which saving a Phalanx unit for late on is maybe not the worst thing in the world. But pikes would be better. I know that Misty Mountains don't have pikes, but the purpose of saving those units seems a little bit moot now. It probably would have been a little bit better perhaps to ask Rhudaur to save their Ranadine pikemen, and instead you commit your Heavy Goblin Halberds earlier in the fight. Not only is it more disposable, it also offers more manpower to the front line. A bit of AP as well for when you're pushing through. Halberds are a little bit better in close combat than pikes after all, so they can be a little bit more useful when the line starts to break. In comes more defending Black Riders. There's still the attacking Black Riders to deal with, but they're going to offer no problem whatsoever when the Spears of Orthanc and Morroquendi pikes are around. Very good at dealing with mounted units up close and personal. And I think that's going to be the problem here. I just think the attackers don't have enough left. They certainly don't have enough quality left. The Goblin King Bodyguard and the Black Riders of their own are the only units they have left which are anywhere near healthy. Those Blackback Mountain Berserkers have their backs to the wall, and they will ultimately be defeated. So I think we're going to see a defending victory here. And fair play to the defenders for that. Victory is a distinct possibility. Yeah, there's fences as well. I was just looking around, like they don't have that much left, the defenders, but I mean, what they do have is of good quality, more pikes. Fences, of course, very capable of looking after themselves in melee. Morroquendi bows and Cholchro axe throwers are pretty much the worst thing they have left from a melee standpoint. Here are the Goblin King Bodyguard as well now, but they haven't managed to force their way through this one choke point at the front. For Thranduil's Halls, I think I would honestly rather, if someone updates the map, I'd rather they just get rid of the gate and leave it as an opening. Because the gate is not real, really. Ooh, what are they doing here? They're pulling back a little bit. They're going to allow them in? So some Black Riders left over there as well from X-Fits. Ah, I see, they're allowing the Corsair Fencers to throw some daggers in. And that will do a little bit of extra damage, but it also allows more Heavy Goblin Halberdiers to get into position. But more of those higher tier goblins. Ooh, yeah, they've got some archers across the way as well, which I completely missed. Excellent choice for going after the Heavy Goblin Halberds. They'll carve through them. The morale debuffing effect will also make it so they rout just that little bit quicker. Albeit with the Goblin King Bodyguard, they'll be a little bit more difficult to rout, which is why I'm surprised they weren't committed sooner. Yes, you could lose your general, but so many of those units routed unnecessarily, really. Corsair Fence is probably out of ammunition now, so they're being committed to melee. Being skewered. And this is looking very much like a well-oiled defence. But it is interesting, like Master Blaster was a little bit slow once again at the start. It hasn't really been punished in any way. I think the attackers, the defenders played this well. I think they played it by the book. They didn't do anything too outlandish, but they held their lines well. They committed units at the right time for the most part. But I think the attackers, they just focused on that one choke point far too much. If they were going to do that, they needed their artillery to be firing in an accurate way far more often than it was. And they actually did get some good hits. They just needed even more good hits from all of the artillery that they brought. It was a big committal of money to bring that much artillery. And I don't know. For me, it never really proved to be worthwhile. There goes the Misty Mountains General. And yeah, they needed to commit more to the other two choke points. That was the way that they were always going to have to try and approach this. There goes the routing units. There's still Goblin King Bodyguard in here, but they won't last for too much longer, not with Spears of Orthanc all around them. At least I don't think so. They're a pretty resilient unit as far as goblins go. Yeah, they're broken and fighting to the death. And that's the end of them. What do they actually have left? More halberds, more Snaga, Heavy Goblin crossbows, Rhudaur marksmen. Yeah, nothing of any real note. Nothing that's going to cause any sort of problem. 2 pikes. In they come. Here comes another wave. Pulling back, presumably so those Morroquendi bows can have another few volleys and soften them up for the kill. Indeed it is. So again, that's good play. That might be them out of ammo though, so if nothing else it gives them another 100 or so elves that could be committed to the front line. More than the Spears of Orthanc I think are going to be necessary to crush the life out of this attack though. Spears of Amenduir, they're being a little bit stingy here, the defenders at this point. They could just crush the enemies underfoot if they so chose. Snaga skirmishers using their javelins on the Morroquendi pikes. Closing the door fully now with the Corsair Fencers. It really is only a matter of time at this stage. close and personal. Of course, their fences are one of those interesting units. They're one of the units you don't see an awful lot of because they are one of the assassin class units after all. A little bit more tricky to use, a little bit more specialised, but the neutrals made good use of them here today, both with their ranged attacks and with their abilities in melee. Yeah, these halberds at this point getting absolutely dunked on. And it will be a good victory in the end, and it's a nice to see the neutrals. It's just something a little bit different, which is part of the reason why I'm doing this replay now. Squeezing in with these pikes at this point, just trying to crush the life from the attackers. This battle has been decided for quite a while at this point, but there's not many of the defenders left, to be honest with you. The only reason why I'm so confident the defenders would have won pretty much from the first engagements within the halls here is just because of the quality discrepancy more than anything else. Even if the numbers were obviously at the time very much in favour of the attackers, the quality just wasn't there. Only the Blackback Berserkers and the Goblin King Bodyguard were useful really, because they did have the Black Riders and still do have the Black Riders, I think, but with pikes on hand and with big, very effective spears like the Spears of Orthanc, they were always going to be in a substantial amount of trouble. And that is pretty much going to be that. I think as we have a look out here, whose Black Riders are those? Newbie ones, yeah, so you can see that they weren't all that effective. Catapult trying to do their thing. Rhudaur Marksman firing. Trollshaw Axeros, they're going to try and do some damage. I mean, this is a sally forth here, which is going to be fairly painful actually. But I can see why. I mean, I think the Misty Mountains player there just admitted defeat. Indeed, Mordor still have their Black Riders, Rhudaur still have their units. I mean, that's a lot of damage there that they just took. Taking a ton of damage actually, especially from the axe throwers. Who knows, maybe this battle could yet turn around. I mean, I assume that was a gentleman's agreement. They decided they would attack. There's still Black Riders though, which is going to prove to be a big problem. For both sides though. Morroquendi pikes moving forward, Spears of Orthanc still in good order. The Trollshaw axe throwers are running, but I mean this is the problem now, like they're never going to be able to get another shot off again. Neither will, well, the Rhudaur Marksmen I think are going to try and, no they're not, they're doomed. It's going to come down to Newbie One's Black Riders to try and turn this around, I think, even with the massive amount of damage that they took crossing that bridge. Yeah, the Trollshaw axe throwers are routing. It's all over. That was a punishing sally out, certainly. Exvitz's Black Riders are here. Obviously the morale debuffing effect on these basic Rhudaur units is going to be fairly painful for them. The catapult can no longer really fire because they're being engaged on in melee. Everything's a little bit too close anyway. In come the Morroquendi pikes, and that's going to be that. Bit of a... had to clench your teeth going across that bridge there because they took an awful lot of damage. But in the end, made things just a little bit spicier towards the end. And we are still going to see a defending victory, and this was a good battle, I have to say. Nice to see the Dead of the Marshes. They're a cool looking unit, if nothing else. Those axe throwers have returned, but there are still Black Riders buzzing around, albeit I think only Newbie One's Black Riders are still alive, but there are also the Morroquendi bows that still have ammunition, which are going to absolutely dunk on the Trollshaws. The one Black Rider getting surrounded by Spears of Orthanc. I'm amazed these Rhudaur Marksmen are still in melee, to be honest with you. Like, that should probably be the end of them with a charge in there from Exvitz's, and yes indeed it is. The Trollshaws, only 2 of them remain. I think, are they going to be the last ones? Well, Newbie One's Black Rider. He's going to charge into the Morroquendi bows. They do actually have a very minor anti-cavalry bonus in melee with those glaives, so they can actually look after themselves, albeit the Black Rider's a caliber of unit which is... Well, yeah, it's going to be the Black Rider, the last one left. And there he goes. Victory for the defenders.
Our soldiers have fought and died well today.
97 to 97, but of course, there's routing units as well, a substantial amount of routing units. So 3% the difference, though. Obviously, a lot of that comes down to the fire at the end. It still would have been within 10%, even without that savaging that the neutrals took at the end from crossing that bridge. But yeah, very, very interesting fight. It's different, which is always something that I look for in a fight these days to try and keep it fresh. Black Riders from Master Blast are getting over 500 kills, very difficult to stop. Obviously Nazgul is so resilient. the reason why you see Nazgul get worn down is the fact they can't obviously move away from fights and pick and choose their engagements because they're on foot and they're quite slow. That's not the case for the Black Riders, of course. They can charge in and out as they please, and without a large amount of enemy cavalry to bog them down, was always going to be a good opportunity to use them here, especially against all of the low tier units they were facing. Rest of the army, Dead of the Marshes were obviously just a meat shield, so it makes sense they didn't get the most kills, but Morroquendi Bows doing very nicely, Scouts doing very nicely, and the Spears of Orthanc. Yeah, Spears of Orthanc with the crossbows, weren't they? That was what I was looking for. So yeah, decent performance from his army all round in terms of kills. Engsvitz, again, over 400 for Black Riders for him, over 400 for his Spears of Orthanc. Very good for his Morroquendi Bows as well. Corsair Fencers doing very nicely. Yeah, overall, the damage dealers getting the higher kills, the tanks, or the meat shields I should say, in the case of the Dead of the Marshes, standing in the way and absorbing that damage. So yeah, I think that was really what went wrong for the attackers here. They just focused too much on one choke point when they really should have been spreading out their efforts across multiple chokes. Like, it's okay to sort of only have a token attack on maybe one of those chokes, but you need to be putting a bit more emphasis on more than one of them, and at least being a bit more serious about two avenues of attack on this map, I think, because that will often yield better results than this, where the attackers really played into the defenders' hands by allowing them to focus more on one side, and in the end they never quite recovered from that. It was still very close, of course, and any lapses in judgment from the defenders would still have allowed the attackers to win playing like that, but the defenders played well enough and didn't make any mistakes, and that was why they ended up winning in the end. So yeah, a big thank you to Master Blaster for sending me this battle replay. Nice to see the Dead of the Marshes. Hopefully I can get a good shot of them for the thumbnail for this one. Like I said, the new schedule is now in effect. The exact days I'm not quite sure, because I'm recording in bulk here on the weekend now, and then I will choose the exact days that I'm going to upload. Obviously 3 videos a week, 3 edited videos a week, such as these, and then the probability, or the possibility I should say, of a stream once per week as well. Possibly on the Friday. I think maybe a stream every 2 weeks is probably going to be a little bit more likely, because I do want to sort of future-proof my schedule a little bit so that I can continue doing it into the autumn when I'm back in university, obviously doing my thing, and obviously then it will have to change, like I said in the channel update a while ago. It'll have to change once again when I move back to well, when I have other stuff going on. But again, things are a little bit unclear still. Obviously, again, there's not a great deal of clarity going on at the moment, but I do have a basic idea of what's going to be happening with the channel moving into then. I can sort of adjust the schedule that I'm going to be working with up until February of 3 videos a week and maybe 1 stream every 2 weeks. At least that's kind of the idea I have at the moment. And then we can change it around a little bit. But regardless, enough waffling from me. Big thank you to all the players and Master Blast for sending this one in to me. Next up, I think we will be having a Silmarillion battle that was a Silmarillion scenario rather that was made. So that should be quite interesting. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.